Dawn slides over Fort Granite Ridge at 6:10 a.m. as the staging yard wakes. MRAP engines cough, settle into a steady rumble, and push heat into the cool air. 12 soldiers from the 75th Ranger Regiment, call sign Reaper 1-2, tighten straps and check magazines. Webbing cinches. Chin straps go snug. Safeties get confirmed. Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks walks the line with a checklist in his head. Eyes on hands, posture, muzzle discipline, and spacing. At the edge of the yard, a lone woman stands in dusty boots and a plain jacket. No unit patch. No visible rank. She does not fidget. Her breathing stays slow and even, and her eyes gather detail without turning her head. Junior enlisted Rangers drift past and trade low remarks in the engine noise. One thinks she wandered in from supply. Another wonders if she is lost. Brooks hears nothing, already counting vehicles off the chalk. Private First Class Noah Bennett rides high as gunner, hands near the turret swing, a thread of unease under the armor. He feels eyes he cannot place and scans rooftops, then slides a look back to the figure by the fence. She stands like a shooter holding a picture steady, weight balanced, head still. The yard hums. A voice leaks into air. Who is she? Stay with us. Lieutenant Commander Jordan Hale moved through Fort Granite Ridge like a registered visitor no one logged. Her paperwork said Naval Special Warfare, Sniper, Instructor, and Overwatch Evaluator assigned to audit training and marksmanship. Range Control had her badge and schedule. She carried no unit patch and kept her hands empty, eyes quiet, steps measured, and posture relaxed enough to vanish into traffic. Junior enlisted Rangers gave her the sideways look meant for background staff. A private casually guessed supply and kept walking. A private first class shrugged and said she was nobody important with his eyes, not his mouth. Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks passed with a clipboard brain, checked magazines, radios, and slings, glanced at her once, then went back to pre-mission checks on the MRAP line. The platoon sergeant stayed hooked to TOC and spoke in short nets that carried purpose. Patrol intel reports from the week rode across desks and screens. Civilians absent along the main lane. Livestock gone. Shutters closed. Radios popping at odd intervals near the choke that fed Arkin Valley. Jordan walked past Range Control with an ANPRC 152A on her belt. For evaluation work, her handset carried the proper fill, so she could monitor pattern traffic on the training net without stepping across lines. No public speakers carried anything classified. She listened to fragments, offsets, and times that felt too practiced already for a sleepy village. She did not turn her head when she scanned. Breathing settled deep and slow. Shoulders quiet. Weight balanced over the arches. Fingers rested with purpose while her gaze held center. She read small tells and let noise slide past. Glances landed on hand positions, sling routing, and where helmets sat on brows. A range sergeant passed a clipboard and kept moving. Then a name rolled through a routine line and turned the day hard in her chest. Arkin Valley, and a counter-sniper they once called Spectre. She remembers a ridge that smelled like dust and hot metal. The SR-25 Mk-11 steady on a bipod. A rear bag tucked into her shoulder. The reticle floated and settled with each slow breath. The way instructors teach, until it becomes the only rhythm that matters. Her partner shifted a few inches to glass the low ground, then went still in a way that had nothing to do with discipline. The shot that took him was clean and distant, a line drawn by a counter-sniper who later earned the name Spectre. Days later, the chapel air felt colder than the weather outside. She stood with a folded flag in her hands and made a promise meant for no one else to hear. She would guard the ones who walked into danger and do it even if she never wanted to press a trigger again. The weight of that flag sat in her chest longer than any ruck she ever carried. Back at Fort Granite Ridge, the yard hums and the engines roll like a dull tide. She is officially instruction and evaluation now. a naval special warfare sniper who trains others and writes clean reports. Then the name Arkin Valley slips through a routine net call and lands like cold water down her spine. She does not dramatize it, but inaction leaves the room as neatly as a door closing, because a pattern like that pulls a promise back into the light. Range control clears the morning at 7:30 a.m. Jordan walks to the cage with a key from the desk and logs the serial. She selects the M110 SAS in 762 NATO with a loopholed Mark V HD. She checks eyes and ears and steps onto the lane as the line is hot. She begins with safety. Bolt lock to the rear. Chamber verified clear. Magazine, well, empty. She rides the bolt forward, feels bolt carrier movement, confirms trigger reset on a safe dry press. She checks optic mounts and base screws by touch and confirms the torque feels true. She spreads a shooting mat and lays out a Harris bipod and a rear bag. The rifle settles into her shoulder and the stock feels familiar. A Kestrel comes up and the screen gives wind and density hints. She writes simple holds and mills on the dope card and keeps it where her eye can find it. Colonel Marcus Adler passes at an easy walk. He recognizes her from earlier naval special warfare exchanges and reminds her that today is evaluation only. She nods once, and he moves on without breaking the rhythm of the range. Nothing about the moment asks for more. She builds a stable prone and lets weight sink into the ground. Natural point of aim aligns with the target frame, and the reticle steadies with her breathing. Heart rate steps down until it feels like a metronome. She presses through a clean trigger to confirm a known 0 and reads the result without drama. Her choice is quiet and physical. She safes the rifle and clears the chamber with care. The M110 is secured, the dope card stowed, the pack staged for movement. She walks off the lane, knowing that if the indicators close into a kill zone, she will be on a ridge before anyone asks for her. 2 MRAPs roll from Fort Granite Ridge as Reaper 12 checks in by chalk. Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks runs final hands on inspections. Magazines topped off. Slings set. Optics capped. Tourniquet staged on armor. ANPRC 152. A radio's click-through presets with SINGAR's frequency hopping verified. And the platoon sergeant stays tied to TOC with short buys. Clear traffic. The convoy clears the gate at an easy pace and settles into the route. They enter the village in a staggered file with correct interval. Gunners scanning high and low. Drivers hugging the center to avoid culverts. Alley mouths slide past like empty eyes. Private First Class Noah Bennett rides the turret and feels a quiet tug in his gut as his headset fills with thin static. Civilians are absent, livestock missing. Doors pulled tight on hinges that should rattle at this hour. Radio noise thickens in uneven waves that feel like interference rather than distance. Brooks watches spacing and posture and signals a shift to tighter intervals through the constricted lane. The platoon sergeant confirms location with TOC and logs timing, while the lead MRAP eases around a blind corner. Bennett marks small glints where windows should show life and files them as unknowns. On the North Ridge, Lieutenant Commander Jordan Hale starts uphill with a printed map recon folded in her pocket. She moves with a climb. Pause. Scan rhythm. Staying low against rock and brush and picking lines that hide her silhouette. She notes terrain that offers a solid backstop and a stable prone, then keeps climbing as wind tugs at the veil in her pack. Ahead, the street geometry builds a likely choke point, where PKM teams could rake a lane and RPG-7 crews could stage near alley breaks. Brooks orders the element to tighten spacing and keep eyes out. Jordan gains elevation and angles toward a planned overwatch shelf. The air feels thinner and more certain. If the signs lock in, she will build a hide. She climbs the North Ridge above Arkin Valley with a steady rhythm that keeps her profile low. 3 steps. A pause. A scan. Then another quiet push along stone and scrub that break her outline. Loose rock shifts under her boots and settles, and she uses the lay of the ground to mask movement from the village. Breath rides in and out on a calm count while she studies angles and looks for a shelf with a solid backstop. She finds it under a shallow lip of rock with brush that gives natural concealment. A shooting mat unrolls. The Harris bipod locks. And a rear bag fits under the stock like a familiar key. The M110 settles into her shoulder with measured pressure. She lifts a kestrel, reads wind, notes, density, altitude, and turns the numbers into clean mill, holds on a dope card she tapes where her eye will land. A quick comms check hums through the ANPRC 152A on her belt. Singar's frequency hopping is up with the correct fill from evaluation duties. But interference chews the edges and leaves only fragments. She confirms natural point of aim and lets the sight picture stop moving. Blinks come less often to hold moisture. Her body sinks into the ground until the hide feels like part of the ridge. Below, the pattern begins to show. Likely PKM nests cover a narrow choke. RPG-7 launchers sit where an alley breaks sightlines cleanly. A small cluster works handheld radios from deep shade. She makes no sound and takes no shot. The stillness becomes deliberate as she commits to serve as silent overwatch if the lines converge into a closing kill zone. From her hide, Jordan studies the village and sees the lines fall into place like a drill. PKM teams sit behind broken walls that look straight into a narrow choke. Barrels already set to rake the lane. RPG-7 launchers wait at alley breaks where a single step would give them clean angles. In deep shade, a small knot of men work handheld radios, their heads bent the same way every time traffic hits. A spotter flashes a sliver of mirror, then swaps to simple hand signals that move fire like traffic lights. Jordan notes each node and writes the order in her head. Machine guns first. Rockets second. Command and control when they lean in to talk. She settles behind the M110 SAS on the Harris bipod and draws the rear bag into her shoulder pocket. The kestrel gives wind, and she converts numbers to mill, holds on the dope card without fuss. Breathing runs slow and even until the reticle barely moves. She taps the stock once to clear stray thoughts and returns to the sight picture. Across the valley, a figure on the far ridge lies in a prone that wastes no motion. The rifle is a disciplined SVD with a modern variable optic. Mounts tidy. Movements minimal. He checks lane after lane and never hurries. The pace says professional, and the comm says this terrain already belongs to him. Down below, Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks tightens the formation and keeps spacing honest as Reaper 12 edges forward. He calls short movements, sets security, and forces the routine to hold. Private First Class Noah Bennett catches a faint glint near a rooftop but cannot place it. The silence feels loaded rather than empty. When the spotter goes quiet, the far ridge alters tempo. The SVD begins to bracket likely hides. Corrections short and thoughtful. Jordan slides a body length to the side, rebuilds her position, confirms natural point of aim, and rechecks her holds. The valley holds its breath while two shooters test each other without a word. They recognize discipline across distance through rhythm and restraint. Neither rushes a bad angle. The board is set, and both know it. The duel exists now even before the first shot. The ambush snaps alive when an RPG-7 strikes the lead MRAP and rips the front axle off the frame. The vehicle slews across the alley and locks the choke point, while gunfire tears from rooftops and broken windows. Dust lifts in sheets, and the sound turns into a hard, metallic roar. Reaper 12 feels the lane shrink around them as bullets chip brick and steel. Jordan stays flat behind the M110, SASS with the Harris bipod planted and the rear bag firm under the stock. The kestrel gives wind, and she turns the numbers into mill, holds on the dope card with a quick glance. Her priority tree is set before the reticle settles. Machine gunners first, rockets second, command nodes next, then any flanker trying to fold the Rangers in. A PKM barrels through a firing arc on the left roof, and she breaks it with a clean press. Another PKM swings from a balcony and drops before the belt can run. An RPG team huddles behind a corner and shoulders a second tube, and she cuts the trigger man and leaves the loader frozen. The reports of her rifle bury themselves inside the chaos rather than vanish. On the street, Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks takes control with short calls and hand signals. Smoke blooms white across the alley, and he orders break, left to cover as pairs move in bounding overwatch toward thicker walls. The platoon sergeant works the net with TOC through static and keeps the timeline honest. A rifle runs dry, and a voice marks the cadence with calm rhythm that others can mirror. Mag out. Mag in. Rack. Back on. Private First Class Noah Bennett rises in the turret to track a rooftop marksman, and a round snaps past his ear. Jordan cuts the rooftop before the next shot arrives, and he sinks back into the armor with a breath he did not know he was holding. Across the valley, Spectre reacts with a professional cool. He starts to bracket her hide with short corrections that eat into the rocks around her shelf. Jordan shifts a meter to the right and rebuilds the position without rush. Natural point of aim returns, and she rechecks wind before sending another controlled shot into a radio man who was pulling a team forward. The rhythm of the ambush loses its timing when key guns go quiet. Behind hard cover, the Rangers find a foothold. And on both ridges, two shooters settle into a deliberate duel for what comes next. Jordan slides the scope off the valley and takes the southern approach into view. Vehicles hide nose out along a side street, ready to push a convoy off the main supply route. RPG, 7 teams crouch near alley breaks, while a small command group leans over handheld radios in the shade. She keys the ANPRC 152A on her belt and checks Singar's frequency hopping with the correct fill from evaluator duties. Static bites the edges, but the net opens long enough for a short advisory. Ambush South Road. Alter route now? The quick reaction force, led by Captain Lauren Pierce, catches pieces through the interference and reads enough to turn. The lead truck shifts off the MSR, and an RPG hammers empty roadway. Engines surge, and the column keeps moving. Jordan swings the M110 SAS and takes the first RPG gunner as he shoulders the tube. The second launcher pops into view, and she breaks the shot before he can find an angle. The radio man reaches for his handset and folds, which cuts command and control at the edge of the trap. Spectre seizes the moment and sends a disciplined counter-sniper round across her left shoulder. Heat blooms under the jacket, and her world narrows to steps she has drilled. She applies self-aid with a pressure dressing, shifts a meter to the right, rebuilds a stable prone, confirms natural point of aim, and brings the reticle back to level. Down in the alley, Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks uses the pause created by her fire to move casualties to better cover. He calls short bounds and tightens security as the platoon sergeant keeps a thin thread with TOC. The team breathes on a beat that is steady rather than panicked. The southern ambush breaks apart when its guns go quiet and vehicles back away from the funnel. The QRF keeps rolling with spacing honest and eyes up. Jordan accepts the cost in her shoulder and turns the scope back toward the far ridge where Spectre waits for the next exchange. Key enemy guns go quiet, and Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks pivots the element into a fighting withdrawal. Two teams trade set and move in bounding overwatch while rear security watches the alleys and rooftops. Smoke for concealment blooms at intersections as Rangers shift left to avoid a dead space and drag litters toward a casualty collection point. The platoon sergeant keeps a thin thread to TOC, logging times and grid updates while fire slackens but does not vanish. Rangers work cover with discipline, muzzles downrange and fingers off triggers while moving. Short calls pass clean across the stack. Contact fading. Set. Move. Crossing. Last man. Armor scrapes, stone and boots find purchase through broken brick as they steer for the pre-planned extraction point outside the village. A wounded man breathes steady under a pressure dressing, while a buddy checks his sector and keeps the litter moving. On the north ridge, Lieutenant Commander Jordan Hale breaks down her hide and starts down with the M110 SAS slung. Her left shoulder sits tight under a pressure wrap, and she picks lines that keep her low against rock. Dust hangs in the street when she reaches the edge of the element. Private First Class Noah Bennett catches sight through the haze and knows the shape that held the glass above them. No one salutes in a hot zone or under rotor wash. Respect lands in smaller ways. A nod from Brooks. A steady look from Bennett. a brief hand to a shoulder as medics stage casualties for lift. Weapons stay safe and controlled while security fans out to cover the perimeter. The element consolidates at the extraction point. Sectors assigned and dust curling in the heat. Jordan moves with the medics, and Brooks scans the rear, marking in his head that someone on the ridge changed the fight. The UH-60M Black Hawk drops in for a dust landing at the LZ, nose into the wind. Skids, kissing dirt as the rotor wash builds a tan curtain. The door gunner scans 6 o'clock and keeps the sector honest, while medics step off with litters and bags. Perimeter stays tight and clean, while muzzles track low and safe. The platoon sergeant passes a quick update to TOC and marks the casualty collection point on a notepad. Colonel Marcus Adler steps down from the aircraft and walks the line with economy. He checks casualties first, then the perimeter, then the route for lift. When he speaks to the element, it is brief, steady, and suited to a hot zone. No salutes rise in the wash, and no one breaks posture for ceremony. He names Lieutenant Commander Jordan Hale and gives her role without fanfare. Naval Special Warfare Sniper Instructor and Overwatch Evaluator assigned to audit training, acting on her own judgment when indicators closed into a kill zone. He credits her with breaking key guns and warning a quick reaction force in time to avoid a second trap. He does it without touching classification or chains of command. Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks stands easy and offers thanks in a few plain words that fit the moment. Private First Class Noah Bennett meets her eyes and knows a rooftop shot kept him on the net. Respect moves as a nod and a steady look, not as a formal gesture. Medics work with quiet speed to package litters and confirm airway, bleeding, and pain control. Weapons handling stays strict while the bird spools to lift again. Dust thins and the perimeter tightens as Adler calls the element to form up for movement. The knowledge goes person to person that a guardian on the ridge changed the outcome. It stays inside the valley where it belongs. By late evening, the UH-60M Black Hawk lifts and the LZ turns quiet again. Fort Granite Ridge settles into a low hum that sounds like generators and distant boots. Medics finish care and hand off charts. The perimeter relaxes in measured steps, not all at once. Lieutenant Commander Jordan Hale sits on her bunk with her left shoulder wrapped. Her phone screen holds a short message from Private First Class Noah Bennett that says he is alive because someone watched the rooftops. She sets the phone face down and lets the room go still. The rifle case leans in the corner like another person breathing. At a metal desk, Staff Sergeant Ethan Brooks types an after-action report with careful hands. He writes clean facts only and uses the phrase unknown overwatch element where a name could sit. Times, grids, and actions line up in plain order. The report guards what should stay inside the valley. In a hallway outside the TOC, Jordan tells Colonel Marcus Adler that she did not act for recognition. He meets the words with a small nod and keeps walking. No ceremony follows, because none is needed. Some courage does its work off the record and sends people home with little said. The post sinks into night at 9:40 p.m. Respect moves in quiet ways, not in applause. Share what steadiness looks like, and remember the hands that choose right in hard minutes. Let the story rest where the dust settled, and keep the names where they belong.